Hello and welcome to Psychological Insights. On May 19th, Governor Ned Lamont put a lessening of the sanctions imposed by COVID-19. But I'm still going to my gym and I'm going to the grocery store, and I notice that everyone is still wearing a mask. What's that all about? Is it because they like wearing masks, or is it because they want to hide? Today, we'll be speaking to Dr. Robert Ham. He's a psychologist in West Hartford Center, and we'll be talking about the post-COVID syndrome. I'm Pat Kazikoff. Stay with me. These have been difficult times by anybody's assessment. Describe a little bit about what's been going on.
I don't have to tell you what we've been through for over a year now here in the United States and throughout the world, something we've never seen before. And now here in the United States, we are we're recovering, of course, thanks to the miracle of these vaccines. And our government has been very diligent in getting them, out there, getting people vaccinated. And so people are, and it's springtime. So you have the confluence of these two, very happy events. We're not out of the woods yet, but, we're feeling the optimism of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
But talking about the optimism, I hear people say there's like different theories that the end is near, or this is a cosmic cleanse. What's that all about?
There's always these doomsayers, and maybe there's some validity to it. When we go through terrible times on the planet, some people feel it's the end of the world. But some people see this as just part of the cycle of life. You could see that viruses are there. They're part of their ecological system. And, some biologists would say, well, they're cleansing, part of the planet out. The weak, the infirm, the old, people who are most susceptible. It's part of just the cycle of life. But in any case, it's what we make of it. It's been a very frightening experience, challenging to say the least, and people, can't wait to get back to normal. But it's a double-edged sword. Getting back to normal isn't necessarily all that it's cracked up to be either.
So what about, America's doing pretty well now. What about the government? What has the government been doing to sort of make things right by Americans?
You mean the federal government or the state government or both?
Right, or both.
Yeah, I think that they're trying to help us navigate this so that we can get back to normal by, at first, our first response is, at least when Trump was, there was a lot of debate about whether we should have lockdowns, whether we should have restrictions. It was the economy pitted against the common welfare in terms of health and safety. Not as much under the current administration. We now have a president who is infusing a lot of money. This multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure bill to get the economy running again, and also with all of these precautions that we have to get those vaccinations out there, and people should be practicing safe distancing until we're, out of the woods.
So what about, you're a psychologist. What about the mental well-being of people? What about our mental well-being?
Yeah, I think that is probably the deepest impact that this pandemic has had. It's had different kinds of effects on different people. So I don't have to tell you how stressful it's been. And so we've suffered as a whole in different ways, physically and socially and mentally. So many people, if you've had COVID, you have family members, then you know that the trauma, the loss, lost loved ones and friends, um, or if you've been through it and been hospitalized, or just the anxiety about getting it, even if you haven't, that's had a very deep effect. So there's this lingering feeling of vulnerability that some people still have this fear about re-entering back to normal, um, and trauma about the losses that have witnessed or read about in the news. Um, it's given, uh, in some ways, that's a good thing.
Well, I'm hearing this new word that I'd never heard before, PTSE,
That's
pandemic stress trauma syndrome, or what
yeah,
is it?
yeah. That's the American Psychoanalytic Association introduced this concept. It's called the pandemic trauma stress experience,
Experience.
PTSD, PTSD, just to sort of um, create a category that includes all of the psychological effects that the pandemic has had during and post pandemic, a host of different kinds of behaviors and emotions, emotional experiences, and good and bad.
So
Uh,
what are you seeing like in your office? Like when people come to you, I assume with some sort of trauma reaction. What are the trauma reactions you're seeing from this post-traumatic uh, pandemic syndrome?
yeah, well, first of all, I'm not in my office yet. I'm doing
Okay, well,
that.
that's one thing you're seeing. Okay.
Um, but I see all my patients by telehealth right now. But different kinds of reactions. For some, it's been interesting. It's a paradox, but some patients who have anxiety, social anxiety, depression during the initial phases of the pandemic, they actually felt a sense of greater sense of belonging. People who are more isolated. And the reason for that is they felt, oh, well, now everyone knows what I'm going through. I feel a part of the world as I hadn't before. And as we recover from this pandemic, then there's this resurgence of this anxiety about the pressure of getting back into the world and feeling alone once again. For people who don't have these kinds of challenges, it's been a terrible isolation and deprivation of our normal lives. But again, a paradox, there's been a relief of all of the burdens and the pressures of everyday life, social obligations that now, it kind of there's a very famous book by Thomas Mann called The Magic Mountain that I read many years ago as a young man. And I remember, it was just a timeless world that he described about a man who visited a cousin in a tuberculosis sanitarium and stayed there for 7 years. Didn't plan it that way, but time stopped. And I remember uh, commenting to a colleague of mine that the pandemic reminds me of Thomas Mann's Magic Mountain. There's no time. So this is a kind of what they call languishing. We kind of and it's soothing. So Tim Kreider wrote an article recently for The Atlantic on this phenomenon, that it's living in a bubble, a suspension. It's kind of nice, but at the same time, you feel a sort of a disorientation. And people say, I don't know what time it is, I don't know what day it is, I've kind of lost my sense. There's no
I
more
can,
framework. Yeah.
I can see how that can be appealing to some people because it removes them from the social obligations, family obligations, and now they have a legitimate excuse. Before it wasn't legitimate. I just don't want to see my family. That is not acceptable. But it is acceptable to have COVID, not to have COVID, but to use COVID as the rallying cry of not getting together. So I can understand that. That makes sense to me. And then you take that and then you generalize to other situations at work. Like people who find work very stressful, so they don't go to work, they stay in their homes. I mean, I can understand that syndrome. What I'm having a harder time understanding is the people who are COVID centric. Like, what's their post COVID reaction? You know, they're afraid. They're more afraid than afraid, and they must come to you with certain presentations.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. Our social obligations, it's a relief from all of the obligations, yes. But we live in a world with other people. We live in society. So I think that the beneficial effect, this is the point of Tim Kreider's article, is that it gives us a different perspective so that maybe we don't need as many to comply with as many pressures. It gives us a better perspective. It doesn't mean that we don't have responsibilities and there aren't benefits to the joys of having other people in our lives, certainly family and friends. But I wanted to answer your question, Pat, about my practice, my patients. It's been traumatizing for a lot of people. People are fearful of getting back into normal for fear of contagion. How do we navigate this? We've never been. But also, some people are having some of my patients are coming in with these very frightening fantasies and daydreams and dreams. Burglars are breaking into their homes, cyber security attacks. There's a kind of a world of doom that is kind of pervading. And they think that there's something wrong with me. Am I going crazy? And I try to reassure them that we have been through a time of turmoil in our world with the pandemic. Cybersecurity is real. There just was another one recently with some beef meat producing entity in the United States and elsewhere, um, and that we've been democracy has been threatened in our country as it never has before. Um, and we have migrations around the world. And climate change. So we have all this. So we live in a perilous world. So there's reason to have these fears, and now they've kind of reached the surface. So I try to help them to understand that they're not going crazy, that there is a reality basis for it, and help them to try to navigate their way emotionally through that, so they aren't made so they aren't paralyzed by it.
I mean, what you're describing, paralyzed and having cyber attacks. I mean, it sounds like it's based in reality, but for the head to go to that level
Yeah.
of fear sounds, and I can't use the medical term, but it sounds a little bit psychotic.
Well, no, I don't. Well, I wouldn't say go quite that far, but it can cause a lot of anxiety and sleepless nights. And, yeah, it's it can be very debilitating. Um, so some people are having these kinds of reactions and they're confused by it, and so I try to reassure them that there's a reality to it. It's not psychotic; it's real. It is the world we live in, and but life is, short, and there are dangers in the world. That's just, that's part of the deal.
So
You
what
know?
about you, Dr. Ham? You mentioned that you haven't been seeing people in real. How is this affecting you?
You mean my patients? I am seeing people, friends. I haven't seen family who don't live in the area, but not as much during the pandemic. I am now. Um, so it has affected me certainly. It has felt like uh, the comparison I felt when I was going through this is house arrest. You know, I felt very constrained within the confines of my living environment um, because of the fear of contagion, the danger, and the uncertainty.
How did you do with the isolation?
Well, you try to stay connected with people on Zoom, for one. I'm very busy in my practice, and you know, try to continue to amuse myself with reading and hobbies, learning a foreign language.
What are you learning? What,
Well,
what
not
language?
very well. I was learning French, something I've always wanted to brush up on. Took courses in high school, and I'd like to get back there. Imagine myself vacationing there once again when things open up.
I speak French. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, you're from Canada.
I'm
Yeah,
from Quebec. I'm from Quebec.
yeah,
So
right.
we speak French and English. So
I know.
good luck with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't been doing it lately. I've been so busy, honestly, but it's been fun. Using an app called Duolingo. Um, so, you know, trying to, and philosophically, just trying to find a way, seeing this as an opportunity for me to learn how to navigate myself, my way through isolation. I mean, other people have to do it. You know, how do people in prison do it? How do they manage that? You know, they must. And so there's a way to do it. You don't want to live there all the time, but I think it strengthens us. I think there was a philosopher from the Middle Ages, Boethius, who wrote about the consolations, you know, of Boethius, how he managed through his imprisonment, um, or I think it was some kind of political. He was considered to be a traitor, seditious.
So what would you recommend to people who have been isolated and are now coming out? Would you have some recommendations of how they should come out?
Well, it, it all of my patients I recommend who have anxieties about coming up, I encourage them to go at their pace, what they can tolerate. I do recommend that they get engaged. During the pandemic, I urged my patients to structure their time because we were living in this kind of languishing state. Um, and, you know, we're all eager to get back in one form or another. Um, but with those people who have, as I patients who have these unusual anxieties, this kind of fear of impending doom or panic attacks, I try to help them understand that again that there's a real basis for it, but we have to live in the world. It's the price we pay for existence. So I do ask them to learn how to practice meditation. I do teach a meditative exercise to help them to learn how to live within those fearful thoughts and not become attached to them. Um, because it is, I mean, it is difficult for us, but we have a life. Life is a gift. So it's time to get living.
So how would the meditation, I'm not that familiar with it, but I understand that what meditation does is you sort of clear your head and you're sort of empty for a while, as long as the meditation is. But then does that translate into your life? Like that empty, is that the
Yeah,
concept?
that's right. It's a teaches us to discipline our mind so we don't become attached to the things that we fear or we long for, the things that we suffer cause suffering. We kind of create this sort of inert state, if you will, that is detached from all those things that cause suffering. And that's a discipline, so you have to practice. It's very difficult. I've done it. I know how hard it is, and many of my patients feel discouraged when they practice it because they say, "Oh, my mind is constantly wandering," and I tell them that's normal. That's what our mind does, and that's why you're doing it to learn how to detach. And in so doing, it transfers into your daily life so that you're less affected with these ruminations and these worries about the things that have been coming to the surface because of the pandemic.
When are we going to see Dr. Ham in real life?
Well, you might find me at the grocery store. You might find me at the tennis club,
Okay.
out hiking. Uh, but as far as real life in my office, you mean, or
Yes,
yeah, I
yes.
don't know. I haven't. I also teach, and I know that this fall we're expected to go back in the classroom. So I'm all, it's still early, and I'm still kind of mulling that over in terms of when I'm going to be doing that.
So we're embarking on the post-COVID time and the post-COVID syndrome. Any last words of advice to people who are still, they have their vaccine, they've been vaccinated twice, they've been on their own for 2 weeks after the vaccine. Do you have any advice for those people as to how to start entering the world?
It's understandable that we're fearful about many of us are getting back into the normal. So I suggest to many of my patients to go slowly at their own pace, but to push themselves, push the envelope, as the expression goes. Going to different stores you hadn't been before. Maybe go to restaurants, and visiting friends. Um, and that's a desensitization. When you find that you do it, that things go well, it gives you confidence to do it again and maybe even do a little more. That's
Okay.
desensitizing. Yeah.
Well, that seems to make sense to me, and I didn't present as a problem to you, Dr. Ham, but I have been going to restaurants, and I have been going to the gym, and I have been going to grocery shopping, and different stores. So I guess I'm instinctually following your advice. Now, one more thing, Dr. Ham, you mentioned we were talking about all the people with all the different kinds of problems that are presenting to you. During this time, have you had more people coming to you, not coming to you, but consulting with you during this particular COVID time?
You mean, am I getting more referrals in my
Yes,
practice? Oh,
yes. Oh,
yes.
yes.
Oh, yeah. It's been difficult because the same with my colleagues. So if I cannot take a referral it's hard to find someone I can refer them to because everybody is so busy. And that's a lot of it is the pandemic.
So I guess what we can say is that during the pandemic, there were some industries that did really, really well, like takeout restaurants. They did very, very well.
Right.
Food did well. Garages did well, but travel did not. Tourism did not. But obviously, psychologists did well too.
I think this is yes, but I think it's my prediction is that this will have a permanent effect. People will be more likely to turn to mental health providers. It's less stigmatized in the future, and with telehealth, it gives providers such as myself, psychotherapists, another modality uh, of accessibility for patients who find it more amenable. So I think it is going to have a permanent effect to some degree, maybe not to the extent that it has during the pandemic.
Yeah, no, I'm tending to agree with you. I'm hearing more people talk about mental health than they ever did before. More consciousness raising,
Oh
more
yeah.
things in the news. So Okay, well, I'm hoping that the next time I speak to you, that we'll be completely out. Everyone will be completely out and there won't be as many masks worn. And I can't wait to hear what your next topic is going to be post-pandemic. Thank you,
Okay.
Dr. Ham.
Thank you, Pat.
Always a pleasure.
Same here.